Go ahead and bring myself back into view here. Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's great to have you here for this week's Prezi Like A Pro power session. If this is your first time joining a power session, just a little bit of context around what this weekly series is all about. This is a 30-minute fast and furious demo on a specific skill or feature in Prezi that will help you create better content even faster. So our goal here is to teach you some skills and tips that you can take into your very next presentation build and quickly level up in your current content. So what we're going to do today is about a 30-minute overview, if you will, kind of the concept, and then we'll go behind the scenes in the editor and take a look at how to build something. And then we're going to open it up for an additional 15 minutes of Q&A. That said, we do take questions as we're going through, and as is relevant, I will answer them along the way. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at our session today. Today, we're going to talk about the idea that text is also a visual component of your presentation. And I should introduce myself also for those of you who have not met in our virtual sphere here. My name is Kim, and I'm part of the training team here at Prezi. So text is also a visual. What we're going to talk about today is the idea that text is a visual component of your presentation and deserves just as much thought as any of the visuals that you put in, such as images, photographs, GIFs, stickers, even videos. And the reason I say that is because so often we think of text as almost like a necessary evil in our presentations. I have a lot of information to convey, and the best way to do that is in bullet points. But we know that that can be really overwhelming for your audience. So we want to take a look at some designer-approved tips for how your text can pack the same kind of punch as your visuals and really work together in harmony with them. So let's go ahead and first we'll just take a look at a couple examples. And these are some real examples of slides. And even though these are PowerPoint slides, this is something that's easy to do. I think whether you're in Prezi, Keynote, PowerPoint, Google Slides, whatever presentation format you're using, it's very easy to build some slides like this. So let's take a look at our first one here. So we've got a few different things going on here. Number one, there is an overwhelming amount of text, right? So clearly in this presentation, this content creator had a lot of information to convey, but a couple of the things that we see here as some challenges for the viewer or the audience on the other end of their presentation. Number one, I'm not really sure where my eye should be drawn first. We've got some bullet points, but we also have some color coding. But then on top of that, there's some alignment differences. So I'm not really quite sure where my eye should be drawn and what the most important point is of this slide here. Now, our presentation today is not about recruitment strategy and process, so don't feel like you need to read this slide. But if I were actually giving this presentation, it would be really difficult for, let me flip back to this. It would be really difficult for my audience to both listen to my message and what I'm talking about, as well as try to take in what is on this slide. So immediately, my audience is going to feel a little bit overwhelmed by this. Our next example here is definitely more visual. There's less text. We see some icons that kind of draw the eye in, and we can see a pretty clear title on the top, benefits of making an application over the phone, with 3 main bullet points or subject points contained in our circles here. However, as we look closer, we actually have to read the content before we can really determine exactly what the icons and the visuals are trying to convey to us here. So even though there's less text, the message doesn't really stand out. We don't really know the 3 key points of making an application over the phone's benefits until we actually go in and read in detail. And our third example here, this table is extremely difficult to read. We've got a nice graphic in the background, but it doesn't really have too much to do with what is actually on our table here. And again, there's just not a lot of visual hierarchy that is going to draw my eye into where I need to focus my attention. And I'm probably going to zone out a little bit and not take in the information that is on this slide. However, all of these things are very easy to do because when we're building out a presentation, we're typically on a limited time schedule, and often we're drawing information from other sources. Either we're doing something like a screenshot, or maybe we're doing something like a copy and paste, and you're like, okay, I just need to get all this information on my slide quickly. So here's a way I can do that, and then I'll just talk my audience through that. So what we're going to take a look at today are some tips that you can use to quickly use text to your advantage to make sure that your message stands out to your audience and is also easy for them to comprehend in the moment, but memorable to them after your presentation. So let's take a look at the 3 key areas we are going to talk about today. Now, we could probably spend quite a bit of time talking about this subject as a whole. We could do probably one whole workshop on this. But since today is all about quick, easy tips, we're going to focus on making sure that your message comes first. Talk about managing and leveraging emotions through the text choice that you use. And then also the idea that less is more for your audience. So let's first dive into message first. And the key thing that I want you to take away here is the word relative. Everything is relative. You're going to read this line, and then you're going to come back here and probably scan a little bit to see the entire message. But when you are showing any information to your audience, you want to think, what is my big idea that I want them to take away? And the idea here comes down to visual dominance. Whatever is biggest on your screen and stands out the most is going to be the thing that pops to your audience. And that just makes intuitive sense, right? But it's really important that we think about this carefully, especially when we're putting a lot of text-based information. The idea that how we place our content and where is going to determine where our audience's eye is drawn first. So after this presentation, what you're most likely to remember from this frame is the word relative. Okay. So what I want you to take away from this as an idea is that where you emphasize your content matters. So you want to prioritize really wisely. If you think back to a couple of the examples that we just shared in the slides just a moment ago, there's not a lot of prioritization on those slides. And if there was any, it wasn't really done in a meaningful way. So I'll just flip back here for a second to one of the examples. If we look here, there's actually a lot of different emphasis going on in this particular slide, right? So we've got all of our titles as well as our subtitles emphasized by using a different color as well as a different font size. But there's too much prioritization on here because I'm not going to remember everything that is happening here. Our next example, there's not really a lot of key things that stand out that are emphasized based on the size, location, or the color of the text. So it tends to all just kind of blend together a little bit too much. So we want to make sure that when we're putting a lot of text on the screen, we're choosing a way to emphasize a key message in a meaningful way that pops on the screen. And there's a few different ways that you can do that. But let's first take a look at an example of some just like simple tweaks in an actual slide. So this is an opening announcement from few years ago, 2018, October 2nd, and small text right above that says, "We are open." Now, this particular slide has chosen to emphasize the date. The problem with leading with the date is that the message that the business is now open is getting buried. And when you lead with something like the date here, your audience is going to immediately be thinking about connotations that they have with that date. Maybe it's close to a birthday, maybe it's close to a deadline, something happened few years ago that they are going to be thinking about. And it's really detracting from the overall message that, hey, our business is open and this is exciting news. So simple tweak, just flip the script a little bit. And we're going to take the "we are open," change that to the part that really pops. And one of the reasons that the "we are open" is working here is because the color choice is working with the shelf color in the background and kind of creating some visual lines for where your eye is drawn. But we've also moved that October 2nd into the subtitle there. It's much less noticeable. So all of the focus and all the emphasis is on the exciting news that, hey, our business is now open. And of course, there's not a lot of overall text on this slide that is going to overwhelm the audience viewing this content. So your audience should know your main point in about 3 seconds or less. And 3 seconds is probably the uppermost limit on that, I would say. You want them to instantly be able to grasp what you're conveying to them. And keep in mind that people read much more slowly than they comprehend visuals. So when you're thinking about putting those text pieces on your screen, you want to think about those the same way you would as a visual. What is this immediately conveying to my audience? And can they comprehend it in 3 seconds or less without having to read a lot? So here are a couple ideas that will help you think about how you might creatively place some of your content and get back to the idea of visual dominance on your slide. Now, you're not going to use all of these. All of these on a single slide would probably be too much. And you want to stick to just a few of them in any presentation just for the overall visual cohesion, right? You don't want to do too much mixing and matching because that's going to be a little bit confusing for your audience. However, you can create visual dominance by using a few of these strategically and placing them throughout your presentation on your slides or your frames. So number one is going to be size. That is, I would say, probably what jumps out first in this collection here is just what's biggest on your frame is where my eye is immediately drawn. But you can also pair that with blocks of text that are creatively sized to differentiate that part from the rest of your message. So for instance, if I was just using size in this block of text, I'm probably thinking, okay, here's main point and here's some key context. Those two make a really nice pairing to give a little bit of information and kind of guide my audience's eye. You might work in something else on these and pick one of these others, such as contrast, color, font choice, or highlights. All right, so tip number 2 is think about how to manage emotions and set the tone or the mood of your presentation through the text that you choose. So let's take a look here. I'm going to put some fonts on our side here, and I want you to chat in for me what this says to you, the immediate thing that this suggests to you just based on the font style. So I'm going to open up my chat here. Playful. Casual. Ooh, childish. Fun. Formal. So if you're thinking about using something like permanent marker is going to be great for some types of presentations and some audiences. So you always want to have your audience in mind. But this is something that I might see with a company that is maybe a little bit more playful in their presentation, maybe something that has a little bit more like a graphic feel in their branding, but probably not something that is going to be a little bit more buttoned up and formal. So let's take a look at our next one here. Pop this up. What about this one? What does this text say to you? Arial. This is a old standby, I would say, for many presentations. Professional, boring, formal, copy and paste. And what's interesting too, that comes out every time I have this exercise up is that we get different answers. So a lot of the answers will be the same from the attendees on these calls, but I always get some surprising answers as well. And one thing that I want to point out based on that fact is just that your audience is going to have different connotations. We all come to any presentation, including visuals, colors, text, etc., with some preconceived notions and connotations for everything that we're about to see. So knowing your audience is going to be key in deciding the type of text that you want to use and how your audience is going to receive it. We can't predict 100%, but always useful to keep in mind. All right, so let's take a look at just a couple more examples here. How about this one? Old standard TT. Stuffy. Looks like a book. Specific information. Fussy, weird, pro. Okay. Facts. Okay. Right. So you can see how as we're getting these answers coming in, there are certain trends that come out and the type of information we might expect to be conveyed using certain text styles of certain font styles over others. So I think that, as you're building out your presentation, you can use some of these to kind of set the mood for what you are wanting your audience to think about and how you want them to perceive your information. So for instance, if I was, let's say a school teacher, young children, I might choose something that's going to be a little bit more fun and a little bit more playful in my presentation, right? Or if I am a design and marketing agency, I'm going to choose a specific font style over another compared to if I am maybe a securities and investment firm, right? So thinking about the the way that each one of the font styles that you choose can convey a certain emotion, you can play with that to sort of set the tone for your presentation, but also make certain information stand out. So imagine if I had all of my content, let's just say in Arial here, except keywords were in permanent marker. That would make them stand out. And it would also make my audience think like, oh, okay, they're serious about this, or this is an important point for them. Or if I want to include a quote for my presentation, right? So I want to convey that customers have a high level of faith in our product or our services. I'm going to include that quote in something like this because that conveys the idea of facts to my audience, right? Or this is actual factual information, right? So thinking about that, something like free serif, old standard TT, and even Arial, these are all going to be considered more formal, professional, standard, and I would say maybe less stand out fonts that are great for conveying a certain more like subdued formal mood. Whereas something like Sniglet, Animatic, Permanent Marker, these are all a little bit more of a pop or a tone or playful in their conveying of your message or your mood. So based on the fonts that you choose, the placement, and also the color and contrast that you're working with, they're all going to work together to evoke that response from your audience and also make sure that your message stands out. So here's some ideas, and this is actually a cheat sheet that we will send out for you after our session. So you'll actually be able to make a copy of this in Prezi and then play around with some of this inspiration for your next presentation. So, and of course, if you're working for a particular organization and you have brand guidelines, you'll have to work within those brand guidelines. But I encourage you to take a look at some of these different options here and think about how you can work them together into your presentation to make your text more visual. So keep an eye out for that. We will be sending it out about 24 hours after our session. You'll get that along with the recording. All right, and last but not least, before we go behind the scenes and take a look at the editor, the idea that less is more. And we frequently get this question when we're thinking about text: how much text is too much? And in general, I just think that a great way to approach this question is if the amount of text on your screen is distracting from what you're saying to your audience, and you're forcing them to make a choice between listen to the presenter or read the slide, you probably have too much text on your screen. So go back to the idea of 3 seconds or less is how quick your audience should be able to grasp the slide's message, right? So fortunately, this is placeholder text and not anything I'm asking you to read while I'm actually talking here. Otherwise, I would say this is too much text and kind of a boring slide anyway. But if you're looking for the sweet spot for how much text you want to put, if you have a chunk, about 50 to 60 characters or 10 to 12 words per line is the ideal length that your audience is going to read here. So if we look at the top line here, under 92, that is a long way for the eye to work back and forth across the screen. 27 is a little bit too short, but 50 to 60 characters, 10 to 12 words is kind of the sweet spot for where your audience is going to feel comfortable reading in a chunk of text on the slide. And when in doubt, use visuals. So if you're ever looking at your slide and you're thinking, this is a lot of information, and I'm not sure my audience can both listen to me and read the slide at the same time, think about how you might take some of the text that is on your screen and turn it into a visual component. We talk a lot about that here at Prezi. So let's take a quick look at a little cheat sheet activity for how you can do that. So here's a pretty basic slide here about learning to ride. What are the steps in learning how to ride a bike? You're going to put training wheels on your bike. Then, after you're comfortable using the training wheels on the bike, you're going to raise the training wheels a little bit so that you wobble. And you're going to get comfortable with the wobble so that you can balance yourself. You want to make sure that you're wearing clothing and a helmet to protect yourself in case you fall. Once you remove the training wheels, practice falling onto the grass so you don't skin your knee, and then enjoy riding your bike wherever you need to go. That's a lot. So let's take out those keywords there. From each bullet point, we're going to think about what's the keyword that I want my audience to remember. So training wheels, wobble, clothing, grass, and go. Let's condense that on down. Everything else we're going to actually think about adding into just our speaker notes. whether we add those to actual speaker notes or we just commit them to memory and what we want to talk to our audience about. But what we're going to keep on the slide is this idea of training wheels, wobbling, clothing, brass, and go. And then we're going to take a look for how each of those can be transformed into a visual component. And part of the reason we talk about this a lot at Prezi is because your audience, and yourselves included, you're going to process visual information in the form of images 60,000 times faster than you will if you have to read a block of text. So when you are using those in your presentation, it really helps to solidify your message with your audience. Now pair that with thoughtful usage of your text as a visual or as a visual component to your presentation, and you really have a powerful, easy message for your audience to quickly digest no matter what you're talking about. All right. So now that we've taken a look at those 3 quick tips there, we're actually going to take a look behind the scenes and we're going to put together a very simple presentation in the editor, and we're going to use only text today. So let's go ahead and switch to a screen share and we'll take a look at how to use some of these in practice. Now, anytime I need to do a screen share, I got to do a little rearrange of my meeting windows. So bear with me for 1 second as I move all of my meeting controls and my Zoom. Now I've got my chat and my Q&A open on my other monitor over here. So if you see me looking over here, that's why. I am going to keep an eye on the chat and the Q&A for your questions as they come in. So please feel free to get those in. If you have any off-topic questions, I'll address those in the 15 minutes Q&A after we have our demo here. Okay, let me bring over our window here that we're going to be building in. There we go. And one more rearrange. There we go. Okay. So where we're going to go today is to create new presentation. And we're going to be using Prezi Present. But just keep in mind that if you're building in Prezi Design and creating something like an infographic or a data visualization, a lot of what we're talking about today is still going to be relevant. We're just using a different editor between the 2 different programs. So let's click Create New Presentation. And this is going to take us into our template chooser. Now, in our template chooser, you're going to find quite a few different categories, right? So general, sales and business development, marketing, etc. And as I click through these, you might notice, hey, there's already a lot of visual hierarchy and some great text built into a lot of these presentations. So when you're looking at our different categories here, all of these templates are actually built by designers. So you're going to find that a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of creating great text components, that's already been done for you. However, one of the questions that we frequently get is, hey, I actually want to build my content from scratch. I don't want to use a template. I actually want to just build from a blank template without any design principles applied. So that's what we're going to take a look at doing here. But I do just like to point out that any of these pre-designed templates, great place to start if you're not sure about how to build out your text components along with your visuals. And also just a great place to peruse for inspiration. But let's go ahead and click into our blank template here, or click Use this template to open up into the editor window. And let's close out of our sidebar here. Okay, so we're going to see here that we've got some placeholder contents, some very simple recommendations for layouts here. I'm just going to select all of this. We're going to delete off the canvas, and we're truly going to just start from a blank canvas here. Let's see, question that came in, will we be receiving this recording? Yes, you will. We typically send that out in about 24 hours after a session, so we'll make sure that everyone gets that today. Let me just make sure I'm caught up here. Okay, don't see any other questions at the moment, so I think we're good to keep going with our quick demo. Okay, so we're starting here with just a blank canvas. I'm going to first come up to my style tab and let's go ahead and just apply a color palette. And actually, let me go to my colors, not my brand kit. And this will just give us something to work with here. Let's choose this one, kind of nice and bold. Okay, so let's say I'm putting together a presentation and it's a sales pitch. And what I want my audience to understand right away is that my company's ratings in terms of customer satisfaction are 25% better than our competitors. Well, the first place I'm going to start in that case is just with the idea of 25. And because that's where we want to start, we're going to go ahead and make this nice and big. And let's also go ahead and maybe let's choose a different text here. This one would work. It's kind of nice and bold. That one definitely stands out, but maybe doesn't fit with the company I'm building for. This one's kind of nice and standard. Let's go ahead and use this one here. Okay. And we'll add in one more text box with the idea of percentage. So let's combine into percent. All right, so I want to make this pop a little bit more. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste 25 here. I want to add a little bit more depth into how this looks on the frame. So I'm going to make a different color here, and maybe we'll use our green and just kind of slightly offset this here. And you can play around here with the different colors that you're using. You know, if you want, oh, not the fill color, that's not what I want. We actually want the fill color for the text itself, not the highlight. There we go. So one thing I do want to just highlight here as you're thinking about your color choices and what you're using. When you're choosing your colors for your scheme, think about choosing no more than 3 to 5, especially if you're building a primarily text-based presentation instead of using a lot of visuals. 3 is going to be a really nice sweet spot to make sure that you have some great visual cohesion. And then you can work in maybe 1 to 2 other colors that are going to help supplement that. So when you are choosing your colors from your colors from your style tab here, that's a great way to make sure that it's nice and cohesive. All of the default palettes are, again, put together by designers, so they have a nice amount of complementary colors, some nice contrast in there. So I would stick with the colors that you find here without going too crazy with adding in one-off color choices. All right, so we've got the idea of 25 here. And let's go ahead and add in another text box. Okay, and we're going to stretch this out here. So one of the things that we want to do, again, back to the idea of visual dominance and kind of hierarchy, we're going to use our block of text here with the 25, immediately draws your eye in, but then we're going to use this size of our text box here along with the percentage sign to kind of match the height, right? Because we want to make sure that this is conveying the message that is all part of the same point here, but we're using our alignment to work with that visual dominance and hierarchy to show that, or to kind of guide where our audience's eye should look. All right. Now, I don't want to just lead with this on my slide here. I want to do something a little bit more interesting here. So I'm going to zoom in, and let's use our bar here. We'll zoom in a bit more. And I actually want to start my message kind of down here. Okay, so I'm going to add in a frame. And a frame is basically me telling my presentation, hey, I want to zoom in here. Okay, so we're going to do that. And what we're actually going to do here is use one of our tips. check our questions here. Okay, I'll answer that in just a moment. All right, so let's add in a text box, and we need to make this one black so it pops here. See my real live typing skills as I make presentations here. And let's center this one. Now here we can mimic what we did on our overview and copy and paste this. Copy and paste this on here to make this kind of offset and do two different colors here. So change our text box in the background. And you can also do something like add in a shape in the background to make it pop. Again, you're going to find a lot of those ideas on the cheat sheet that we will send out. And let's add in asterisks here. And let's zoom out just a little bit. I'm going to make this frame just a little bit small. Now, because we want this to be a little bit, let's say, just different in tone, maybe we want this to be a little bit more playful, maybe a little bit cheeky. In that case, we're going to change this text to something else. So let's find something that is maybe a little bit more playful here. Maybe something almost like a handwriting. So you could use something like this. And in this case, we want to shrink it on down because this is a bit of a footnote. Okay, and now we are going to just expand our frame a little bit by adding in a new one that goes right over this. Okay, so we're going to go from here, drawing out here. And I'm going to do one more here. Let's set this as our custom starting point. So we're going to go from this frame here, and then we go back out. Let's now change this to the text that we used before. And let's add in the rest of our message. Oh, why are we not typing? There we go. And let's shrink down our overview frame just a little bit here. All right. So from here, we built out just our main message. There's, of course, more that we would build out into this presentation, but let's go ahead and pop into presentation mode and see what we've put together. All right. So clean, simple, colors pop. We believe we're the best in the business, but you don't have to take our word for it. Switch in the mood there by changing the font style, right? Oh, and I forgot to put in one key thing, everyone. Let's zoom out to the overview. There we go. Otherwise, we're not going to see the big picture reveal. There we go. Let's try this one more time. Best in the business. Change in mood with our font style. We have 25% more satisfied customers than our top competitor. We think you'll agree. All right, so obviously we'd go through and probably build out more of our presentation at that point, but that packs a lot of punch just with some simple text and the key message that we want our audience to take away from this particular sales pitch. All right, so I know with our demo, we're a little bit over time here for the actual demo and explanation portion, but no worries, we will hang out for the Q&A. So Now that we've gone through our quick demo, we've taken a look at our 3 tips here. And we're going to open up for any additional Q&A that you have. Now, if it's related to today's content, great. If it's not, however, and you have a burning question you've always wondered about Prezi, I am happy to answer that as well. So I will hang out here and take a look. I haven't seen any additional questions or Q&A come in during our demo, so I think we're good, but there was one that I wanted to follow up on. Let's see here. Let me find it. Where did it go? Oh, okay. It was, yes. So the question was, when I'm building out a presentation, sometimes I apply colors and the palettes do not apply to all the shapes. Yeah, so what I suspect is happening is that when you're building, you might be making some manual edits early on in your build and then applying your color palette. So when you're building out a presentation, I typically recommend set your style options first. So that's going to include your background, your color palette, and your text styles. Do that first before you start editing your presentation. And the reason for that is when you make manual edits and then apply a different color palette, it doesn't override those manual edits. So I suspect that's probably what has happened in your presentation build. The other thing you might experience is that depending on the template that you're choosing, there are some elements in the template that will be locked. And that's simply to make editing easier for you. But what you'll find is that because they are locked, you might not be able to make those changes as you go, and you'll have to unlock the elements first. So take a look at that. If you find something you don't seem to be able to change, click on it. You might see a locked icon on top of it, in which case you can unlock it and then make any manual edits that you want. Or you'll see just your general property bar that will give you your options for changing the fill color there. Let's see here. How do I change the font when I go to more fonts? Nothing happens. It might depend on the level of your license. So let me just go back here really quick. And let's pull our screen back over. Okay. So when you go to your fonts here, number one, you should be able to just kind of scroll through and go down the entire list of available fonts to you. Okay. And then when you go into more fonts, you can set and update some of them here. Now, what we see here is that the ones that I've used in this presentation, they're available or clicked, right? But you can scroll through quite a long list here. And if I wanted to add more to my available fonts, I can also check and update that this way, okay? So as it says on the bottom here, this is going to help you choose the fonts that will appear when editing and creating presentations. So this is not just for this presentation, it's for multiple presentations. Now, this is only available to certain license levels, so that will depend on if you have like a premium license, for instance, or teens license versus a free basic license. With free basic licenses, you're going to run into a couple paywalls here and there where some content is a little bit more limited. So let me know if that helps or if you have any follow-up questions there. Let's see, I'm trying to export. Oh, I'm trying PDF export from Prezi Present. Are there any tips for frame usage? Yeah, so a couple things to know let me switch back to my screen share here also. All right, so when you are exporting from PDF, right? In other words, you're here on your dashboard, you click on your 3 dots, and then you go to export PDF. It's a little bit different than when you are exporting like a PowerPoint to a PDF, which is a little bit of a one-to-one conversion. The key thing to know is that when you are exporting a PDF, the way that your frames are going to capture as your PDF pages is that every single step that you see in your timeline, in other words, this left-hand sidebar, that is going to be captured as a frame. So basically every step that your audience sees. Now, In your timeline, let's say you build in some animations. Those are also going to populate here. If you have a ton of animations in your presentation, each separate animation is going to capture as a separate page in your PDF. So for instance, if I had my 25 faded in, my percent faded in, and then a fade out. I've added 3 animations to my timeline here, which we can see right here. When I export that as a PDF, I'm going to have 4 pages of this. We have 25% more customers view, each with just a slight variation based on that animation. So one is going to look like, we'll just go into preview mode here. One is going to look like this. One's going to look like this. One is going to look like this. So it's going to look like you have multiple slides basically that are more or less the same. So when you're exporting to PDF, I recommend a couple things. Number one, remove any of your animations from your presentation. You might want to make a separate copy of your presentation in that case. So in other words, have like a presentation copy that you'll use when you're live presenting, and then make a copy that is for exporting to PDF where you remove all those animations. That will reduce the duplicate number of pages that you capture. And then also, if you are using topics, check your topic path settings. You'll want to make sure that you have your topic settings to zoom directly to the next topic in your path for both of these on the right-hand side. Otherwise, if you have your topic set to zoom in and out of your content, in other words, into a topic, back out to the overview, every one of those motions is going to be captured as a separate page, and it's going to look like you have multiple PDF pages that are exactly the same. So those are the 2 things that I would recommend: removing all of your animations, and then also making sure that you have your topic path settings to the right-hand side here, and that will give you a much cleaner PDF. All right, so let me know if that helps or sparks any follow-up questions. Always happy to answer those, but in the meantime, I'll keep answering here. Does Prezi support Persian language or fonts? Let me send you some follow-up information on that. We've got some information I can provide from our support team on the particulars for Persian languages and fonts. So I will send that out. Let me make a quick note. Oh, maybe with a pen that works. And let me capture your email here. Okay, got that. So keep an eye out for an email from me with more information. All right. I don't see any additional questions at this moment, and we are at our 12:45 mark. So I'm going to say, I think we're good to go and sign off. For those of you who have already said you found the session helpful, I'm so glad. Thank you so much for providing that feedback. I hope all of you found some inspiration and some tips to take away and use in your next presentation. You will be getting this recording session in about 24 hours, as I mentioned, along with any follow-up information that I promised. And again, we always offer these sessions on a weekly basis every Tuesday. So different topics, different tips that we want to share with you. And just to invite you to our next session here, there we go. Next Tuesday, we are going to be talking about creating a big reveal in Prezi Present. So we actually did a little sneak peek of that today in our demo, where we went from a very small portion of our presentation into our big overview, but we're going to go a little bit more in depth on some of those tips to create that kind of like wow moment or that visual punchline with your presentation, and creating a big reveal that Prezi Present is known for. Kind of gives that wow factor for your presentation. So if you're interested in finding out more, whoops, let me not click away from that too fast. If you're interested in finding out more, you can scan this QR code that will take you to a registration page where you can take a look at the date and time. Anytime you see any of our sessions that interest you, but you're not able to attend live, I would say sign up anyway, because we're going to send you the recording, and that way you'll make sure you can get it and watch on your own time. But we love to see you live, so if you can join live and ask your questions, that's great. And with that, I will just say thank you so much for attending today's session. Text is also a visual. And if you have any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us, training@prezi.com. Have a wonderful rest of your week, everybody, and let's chat soon. Bye.